Good morning and welcome to Peace Out, where we are all learning together to peace out. And I'm finding some peace here in a storm, man. We got a toad strangler going on here. It is thunder. The thunder is rattling the walls. I am loving listening to it. I know I'm not supposed to. Am I supposed to be afraid? I think I'm supposed to be scared, but I'm not scared. So I'm enjoying the thunder and the rain. The lightning just went across the sky. I'm going to turn the lights off in a minute when I'm done with this and just sit and enjoy it, because it's just so fun to watch. So cool to watch the nature surround us with sounds and the light show, right? It's really cool. It just makes me think of how big God is, how majestic he is, that he set these things in motion and that they just continue doing this over and over to water the ground so that the ground grows fruit for us. It's this big cycle he set up, and it's still intact. I love that. I just love that. That's not what we're going to talk about today, though. But we are going to talk about God today. So this is our last day in Nehemiah 4. I can't believe we spent 3 days in Nehemiah 4. But here they are. We know that they're trying to build the wall, and their enemies are coming. They've made fun of them. They tried to confuse them. Each time Nehemiah prayed, and he would say, God, what do we do now? This time, they came back and started saying, the people got scared. Judah said, we're not going to be able to finish the wall. And our enemies are saying, they don't know, they're not going to see us. We're just going to sneak in and kill them. And they're not even going to know what happened, right? If they killed them, it would be hard for them to know what happened, right? But that's just my weird thoughts there. But they're like, we're going to kill them so that they can't keep working. The whole thing was to stop them from working. The whole plot of the enemy was to make them stop building the walls of Jerusalem. Why? I don't know why the hatred makes no sense in most cases, right? Anyway, and so then it says, so they're like, wherever we turn, they're going to be on us. They felt surrounded by the enemy. They felt the pressure of the enemy. They felt like the enemy was coming in on them and was going to try to wipe them out, right? And it says, and then it says in verse 13, Nehemiah says, I positioned men behind the lower parts. So he began to position people strategically so that they could fight the enemy and the work could go on. You know what? Nehemiah could have said, you know what? I didn't bargain for any of this. I just came to rebuild the city walls of the city, the walls of the city I love, Jerusalem. He said, I didn't put in for any of this. I'm just going to go back to my comfort zone. I'm going to go back to living in a palace so that I could be the cup bearer for the king. I'm just going to go back because it was much easier to live in exile than it was to come out and try to deal with the enemies attacking and do something productive. He could have said, I didn't bargain for all this. I'm going home. Bye. Right? But he didn't. He said, okay, here's our new strategy. Each time he prayed, he asked God for a strategy and then he enacted it. Acted it out. This time he put the leaders, he put them all up. He stationed them so that some were watching and some were working, and then they would switch. And then later it says those that were working kept a weapon on them, a knife or a sword all the time, so that if the enemy came, they could continue working. They were not vulnerable to the enemy's attack. But here's what he said in the middle of that. He said, I looked and I rose and I said to the nobles, the leaders, and the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Nehemiah was not a warrior in the physical. He wasn't like David. David, if David had said, don't be afraid of him, we got this, we'd say, we're following him because he killed a giant and he killed all them other people and he's a mighty warrior. Nehemiah was a cup bearer. He had soft hands, right? Because he was in the palace and he served the king and while he was in exile, right? He was not a warrior. And he's like, don't be afraid of them. God had given Nehemiah, and this is just my opinion here, but I think God gave him exceptional power, wisdom, and strength for the season he was in. And God will do the same for us. He gives us strategies. He gives us wisdom when we ask. He gives us what we need for where we are, wherever we are, whatever enemies we're dealing with, right? But he said, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord. That's why Nehemiah wasn't afraid. Oh yeah. Don't be afraid of them. Just remember God. Don't be afraid of your circumstances. Remember what God's done in the past. Remind yourselves of things that he's already brought you through, of prayers he's already answered, of things he's already done on your behalf, of the things he's promised you that are out there. If you've got a promise out there This ain't going to kill you, right? Well, you got this. Don't be afraid of them. Remember God. He is great and awesome. Fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. He didn't say, okay, let faith fight for you. So we're going to trust God and we're going to go sit down and see what he does. No, that's not how faith works, honestly. I mean, faith means inaction sometimes. It means Daniel's like, I'm going to the lion's den then, right? And sometimes it means action. In this case, faith was taking action. We are going to trust God, who is bigger than our enemies, and therefore we're going to fight for our sons, our daughters, our wives, our families, our homes. We're going to fight for our city, even. Yeah, he's like, we're going to fight, but we're doing it. We're not going to be afraid of God, of people, because we're going to remember God. He's got us covered in this situation. And it says, when the enemies realized that God had brought their plot to nothing, God brought their plots. It didn't say when they realized Nehemiah had outsmarted them, when they realized Nehemiah had gone beyond and developed a strategy that could beat them. No, they realized God had brought the enemy's plot to nothing, and they all returned to the wall, everyone to their work. It says, when our enemies had heard that it was known to us that God had brought their plot to nothing, the people went back to work. And so the enemies understood it was God that destroyed their plot. And Nehemiah and the people working with him realized that it was God that brought the plot to nothing. It was God who had worked on their behalf. And the enemies just said, okay, they finally just gave up because they're going to build this wall. And the people went back to work and they began to build the wall. You know, it's so interesting to me, this fourth chapter. And I've spent all week in chapter 4, and I'm going to study it for next week, as I'll be doing it in the lessons in New Life Institute in Pakistan, because we're doing a series on Nehemiah, which is why I'm in Nehemiah. But I love this pattern. Something happens, Nehemiah prays. Then he has a plot. Then he has a plan. He trusts God's strategies, and he trusts God. And I love the phrase right here. Don't be afraid. Remember God. That's my motto today. Anything comes across my plate. I've already had several things this morning come across my plate, and you ain't going to have the privilege to know what they are. But I dealt with some 2 or 3 things already this morning, and I'm like, don't be afraid. Remember God. Remember God, who is great and awesome. Remember God, who is mighty and powerful. Remember God, who is on the throne and still in charge. No matter what happens down here, nothing can dethrone him. Nothing can make him throw in the towel and go, I don't want to do this anymore. Just like Nehemiah stayed and built the wall, God's not going to go, I'm just forget y'all. I'm just going to step here in my throne, and on my throne in my kingdom of heaven, and I don't even have to worry about y'all. No, he's going to be actively involved. He's going to give us strategies. We got to take our eyes off of our enemies and put our eyes on God, because that's how we get through the struggle. Then they fought. And sometimes, Paul said, I've fought a good fight of faith. And sometimes faith is a fight because we've got stuff coming at us. We've got situations coming at us. Maybe we've got people literally opposing us. Maybe they're not physically fighting us, but they're coming against us with words and devising crazy plots against us. We see so much of it in the news and on social media stuff. It's crazy out there. I'm trying to stay out of it, right? And so we have to remember God and keep fighting. Remember God, that he's powerful, that he's awesome, that he's great, and that he's mighty, and that he lives inside of us. And then we just go take the enemy out, because we have God's power inside of us. It's not something we figured out ourselves. It's not something that we can do ourselves. But when we remember, don't be afraid of the enemy. Whatever the enemy is presenting to you today, don't be afraid of that. Remember God and keep on fighting. Keep on pulling out those scriptures and going, no, I know this looks like, but this says. I know this feels like, but this says. I know this is stretching me like crazy, but this says. I'm full of the power of God. I'm full of the Spirit of God. God loves me. This heart says, I'm going to trust everything he said about me, that I'm loved, that he empowers me, that I have might in my inner man because he lives inside of me, that he gives me wisdom when I ask. I'm going to believe those things instead of those things that go through my head. And I'm going to not be afraid. I'm going to choose to not be afraid of what I see with my eyes and what I feel in my emotions and the crazy thoughts that go through my head. I'm going to choose not to be moved or be afraid of those things. And I'm going to choose to remember God in my situation right here and right now. That's how we get through. That's how we fight our battle, right? That's a song we sing sometimes. This is how I fight my battle, by holding up the sword of the Spirit and going, this is the truth. What I'm hearing up here may not be the truth. What I'm feeling in here may not be the truth. What I'm seeing out there definitely is not the truth. This is the truth. It will stand. And that's why I can not be afraid of the enemy, but I can trust God, remember God, and remember what God said. That's how we get through the storm. That's how we get through the stuff, right? If the disciples in the boat had remembered that Jesus said, let's go to the other side, they might not have been as afraid in the storm, because they'd say, wait a minute, he said, let's go. We're going to the other side. He didn't say there was going to be a storm. He didn't prepare us for that, but he said, let's go to the other side. So we should know in that moment that we're going to the other side, even if there's a storm in between here and the other side. So remind yourselves of what God has said in this word, what he's told you. Maybe he ministered to you through a sermon or through a devotional or something. And if he said something in your heart, grab hold of it. Don't be afraid of the enemy. Remember God. Remember what God said. That's how we fight our battles. And that's how we peace out. Peace out, you guys. Have a great weekend. I'll see you bright and early Monday morning.